First contact. The crystalline spires of Aetheria Prime sparkled under the light of 3 moons, their iridescent surfaces reflecting cascading colors across the capital city's skyline. In the High Council's observation chamber, Chief Observer Lyra Vex studied the incoming data streams with growing concern. The quantum arrays had detected something unprecedented, a massive void in the cosmic background radiation, moving with purpose toward Aetherian space. Administrator Kale, she called out, her melodic voice carrying across the chamber. You need to see this. The tall, silver-skinned figure of Administrator Kale glided across the polished floor, his ceremonial robes rippling with embedded light patterns that reflected his elevated status. He studied the holographic display, his luminescent eyes narrowing as he processed the information. How long? He asked simply. At current velocity, the anomaly will reach the outer colonies in 30 solar cycles. Lyra responded, her fingers dancing across the control interface. But that's not all. We've detected another signal, something completely different. The display shifted, showing a new set of readings. These were clearer, more defined. Structured transmissions carrying mathematical sequences and what appeared to be attempts at communication. They originated from a completely different direction than the void. These signals, Kale mused, they show intelligence, purpose, yet they match nothing in our archives. The Aetherian civilization had mapped and catalogued every spacefaring race within their observable region of space. Their policy of peaceful observation had served them well for millennia, allowing them to study and understand their galactic neighbors without interference. But these signals were something new. The pattern suggests a young civilization, Lyra explained, but the complexity. Administrator, they've managed to encode quantum-entangled particles into their transmissions. Even we only achieved that level of technology in the last century. Before Kale could respond, the chamber's emergency protocols activated. The peaceful blue ambient lighting shifted to a harsh red, and new data streams flooded the displays. The void had accelerated, dramatically altering its course. Impossible, Lyra whispered. It's changed direction, heading directly for Outpost Helios. The velocity. It's now moving at speeds we thought theoretically impossible for objects of that mass. Kale's composed demeanor cracked slightly. Outpost Helios was their most distant research station, housing thousands of Aetherian scientists and their families. Show me visual data. The holographic display transformed into a real-time feed from Helios's long-range sensors. What they saw sent ripples of fear through both observers. The void wasn't empty space at all. It was a swarm. Countless dark shapes moved in perfect synchronization, their surfaces seeming to absorb both light and sensor readings. Initiate emergency protocols, Kale commanded. Begin immediate evacuation of Helios. Alert the Defense Council. His orders were cut short by a new alert. The unknown signals had changed too, growing stronger and more focused. A new holographic window opened, displaying a transmission that was clearly attempting to match Aetherian communication protocols. The message was crude by their standards, but its intent was unmistakable. Aetherian civilization. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Stellar Horizon. We have detected a Class X threat approaching your territory. We stand ready to assist. Please respond. Lyra and Kale exchanged looks of astonishment. The unknown race. These humans had not only detected the swarm, but had somehow determined it was hostile and tracked its course to Aetherian space. More importantly, they were offering help without any prior contact or diplomatic relations. The Defense Council will never accept aid from an unknown species, Lyra said softly. Our laws are clear about external intervention. Kale studied the swarm's movements again, watching as it consumed everything in its path. Asteroids, space debris, even light itself seemed to vanish into its mass. Then he looked at the human transmission, noting the complex encryption that somehow managed to be both elegant and brutally efficient. Perhaps, he replied, it is time for our laws to evolve. Send a response to the human vessel. And Lyra, he added as he turned to leave. Delete this conversation from the official records. The Council need not know who made first contact. As Lyra began composing the response that would forever change two civilizations, more data poured in from Outpost Helios. The swarm had increased speed again, and the first outer sensor arrays had gone dark. Whatever was coming, it would arrive long before the evacuation could be completed. The Aetherian age of peaceful observation was about to end, and humanity's first official contact with an alien civilization would begin not with handshakes and treaties, but with a desperate alliance against an enemy that defied comprehension. In her private thoughts, Lyra wondered if these humans knew what they were offering, if they truly understood the scale of the threat they had volunteered to face. As she transmitted the response, she added her own personal message, encoded in quantum states so subtle that only the most advanced systems could detect them. Your aid is welcome, humans of Earth, but you should know, nothing that has ever encountered this entity has survived to report what it truly is. Are you certain you wish to share our fate? The response came back almost immediately, carrying the same subtle quantum encoding. That's exactly why we're here. Humanity has a habit of doing the impossible, especially when someone tells us something can't be survived. Lyra felt an unfamiliar sensation, something between fear and hope. The humans were either inexplicably confident or dangerously naive. Soon enough, they would all discover which was true. The coming storm. The human vessel Stellar Horizon emerged from its final hyperspace jump on the edge of Aetherian space, its sleek hull reflecting the distant starlight. Despite its designation as a diplomatic vessel, its reinforced armor plating and concealed weapon ports suggested it was prepared for more than just peaceful encounters. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display, showing their first clear view of Outpost Helios. The research station was a marvel of engineering, a massive structure of crystalline towers and sweeping archways that seemed to float in space, connected by bridges of pure energy. Beautiful, her first officer, James Rodriguez, murmured. Hard to believe they built that without using any metal. The Aetherians have mastered manipulation of quantum states, Sarah replied, reviewing the preliminary scans. Their entire technology base operates on principles we're only beginning to understand. She paused, noting new readings from their long-range sensors. Status update on the swarm. Lieutenant Y at Tactical brought up a new display. Still accelerating, Captain. At current speeds, it will reach Helios in 18 hours. Our predictive models suggest it's already consumed 3 uninhabited systems en route. Sarah nodded grimly. Earth had encountered a smaller fragment of the swarm 2 years ago. The battle for Alpha Centauri had cost humanity dearly, but it had taught them valuable lessons about this enemy. Whether the Aetherians would accept those lessons remained to be seen. The communications array chimed. Incoming transmission from Helios, Rodriguez announced. They're ready to receive our delegation. Sarah straightened her uniform. Signal the Prometheus that we're proceeding as planned. Tell Admiral Drake to hold position at the rally point until we've established diplomatic relations. She turned to her senior staff. Remember, we need the Aetherians' cooperation. Their technology could be the key to fighting the swarm effectively. Let's not spook them by revealing everything we know too quickly. The delegation's shuttle approached Helios's main docking terminal, passing through layers of energy fields that Sarah's instruments identified as both defensive barriers and scanning systems. The Aetherians might be peaceful, but they weren't naive. Administrator Kale and Lyra Vex waited in the reception chamber, along with several members of the Aetherian Defense Council who had arrived after receiving news of the imminent threat. Sarah noted the subtle tension in their postures. These were beings unused to facing direct threats to their civilization. Captain Chen, Kel greeted her, his voice carrying that distinctive melodic quality all Aetherians seemed to share. Your journey here was efficient. We have much to discuss and little time. Agreed, Sarah replied, gesturing to her team. We've brought detailed scans of our previous encounter with the entity you're facing, along with tactical analyses and defensive proposals. One of the Defense Council members, his robes marked with symbols of authority, stepped forward. Previous encounter. You've faced this threat before. At Alpha Centauri, Sarah confirmed, activating a holographic projector. A smaller section of the main swarm attacked our colony there. The battle lasted 3 days. We lost 30,000 colonists and 2 capital ships, but we drove it back. The chamber fell silent. The Aetherians exchanged looks of both surprise and skepticism. Lyra was the first to speak. Our records indicate no civilization has ever survived direct contact with the entity. How did you manage this? Sarah's expression hardened slightly. We didn't give ourselves any other choice. Humanity has a long history of facing extinction-level threats. We've learned to be creative. She gestured, and the hologram changed to show tactical data from the Battle of Alpha Centauri. The swarm operates like a hive mind, but it's not invincible. It has weaknesses, specific energy frequencies that disrupt its coordination, vulnerabilities in its consumption patterns. The problem is hitting it hard enough to matter. Our weapons are purely defensive, another council member protested. We have never developed the kind of military technology you're suggesting we'll need. No, Sarah agreed, but you have something potentially more valuable. She turned to Cal. Your mastery of quantum manipulation. We believe it could be the key to defeating the swarm permanently, not just driving it back. Lyra stepped closer to the tactical display, her scientific curiosity evident. You want to combine our quantum technology with your military capabilities. The swarm adapts quickly, Sarah explained. In the Alpha Centauri battle, it learned to counter our conventional weapons within hours, but it's never encountered anything like Aetherian quantum tech. Combined with our combat experience and the firepower of our incoming Dreadnought. Incoming Dreadnought. The Defense Council member's voice rose sharply. You brought a warship to our territory without authorization. Sarah met his gaze steadily. The HSS Prometheus is holding position 6 light-years out, awaiting your permission to enter Aetherian space. But make no mistake, with or without that permission, we will fight the swarm. The only question is whether we do it together or separately. Kale raised a hand, silencing the council member's protest. You speak of cooperation, yet you position military forces without consulting us. Why should we trust you? Because unlike every other civilization that's encountered the swarm, we're still here to warn you about it, Sarah replied quietly. And because in 18 hours, that thing out there will reach this station. When it does, you'll need to make a choice. Maintain your peaceful principles and be consumed, or fight beside us and have a chance at survival. The emergency alarms chose that moment to activate. Lyra rushed to a nearby console, her fingers dancing across the interface. The swarm, it's accelerating again. New estimated arrival, 7 hours. Sarah's communication device buzzed. A priority message from the Prometheus. She read it quickly, her face darkening. It's not just accelerating, it's growing. The swarm is nearly twice the size our initial scans indicated. She looked up at the assembled Aetherians, her voice carrying the weight of experience. You're out of time to debate. The choice is simple. Let us help you fight, or watch your civilization disappear forever. The Defense Council erupted in argument, but Kel raised his hand again. In the sudden silence, he turned to Sarah. Tell us what you need. Battle for New Dawn. The HFY Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace like a thunderbolt from legend, its massive form casting a shadow across Helios Station. Nearly 4 kilometers long, the human Dreadnought represented the pinnacle of Earth's military engineering. Its angular hull bristled with weapon systems, while patches of its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, adaptive armor designed to repair damage in real time. Admiral Drake stood at the command center, his weathered face illuminated by tactical displays. Beside him, Lyra Vex watched in fascination as human and Aetherian systems interfaced for the first time. The quantum processors she had brought aboard were already revolutionizing the ship's targeting capabilities. Integration at 80%, Lyra reported, marveling at how quickly the humans had adapted their systems to work with Aetherian technology. The quantum field generators are stabilizing. Drake nodded, his eyes fixed on the approaching void that represented the swarm. Status of the evacuation. Helios's civilian population is almost completely transferred to the emergency shelters on Aetheria Prime. Captain Chen's voice came through the comm system. The stellar horizon will remain here to coordinate with the defense platforms. The Admiral's expression remained stern as he studied the tactical overlay. The swarm had grown even larger during its approach, now appearing as a mass of writhing darkness that consumed all light and matter in its path. Long-range scans showed it had already devoured 3 of Helios's outer sensor arrays. "All hands, battle stations," Drake commanded, his voice carrying through the massive ship. "Begin quantum shield synchronization. Prepare main batteries." Lyra felt the subtle vibration as the Prometheus's systems powered up. The humans had modified their shield technology to work in concert with Aetherian quantum fields, creating a defensive barrier unlike anything either civilization had developed alone. "Admiral," she said quietly, "there's something you should know. The quantum readings from the swarm, they're familiar. They match patterns we've detected from the edges of known space. Whatever this entity is, it's not natural. It was created." Drake's eyes narrowed. Created by whom? Before she could answer, the tactical officer's voice cut through the command center. Swarm accelerating. Multiple signatures breaking off from the main mass. The void fractured, sending tendrils of absolute darkness racing toward both Helios Station and the Prometheus. Each tendril was the size of a small cruiser, moving with impossible speed and precision. "All batteries, commence firing," Drake ordered calmly. "Deploy quantum disruption fields." The Prometheus's response was devastating. Massive rail guns launched projectiles enhanced with Aetherian quantum technology, while energy weapons pulsed with frequencies calibrated to the swarm's specific vulnerabilities. Where the attack struck, sections of the void seemed to unravel, revealing glimpses of machinery beneath the darkness. But the swarm adapted quickly. The tendrils that survived the first barrage began shifting their approach vectors, probing for weaknesses in the combined human-Aetherian defenses. When they struck the quantum shields, they didn't attempt to break through. Instead, they began to absorb the energy itself. "Shield power dropping," the tactical officer reported. "The swarm is learning to feed on our defensive fields." Drake turned to Lyra. "You said this thing was created. What if we overload it? Feed it more than it can handle?" Lyra's eyes widened as she understood. The quantum processors, we could reverse their polarity, create a cascade effect. She paused, her expression grave. "But the feedback would destroy the processors themselves. We'd lose our technological advantage." "Better than losing everything," Drake replied. He opened a channel to the stellar horizon. "Captain Chen, coordinate with Helios's defense platforms. When I give the word, pour everything you have into the swarm's central mass. We're going to give it indigestion." The next few minutes were chaos. The Prometheus's weapons blazed continuously as more tendrils broke from the main swarm. Some made it through the barrage, slamming into the quantum shields with enough force to shake the massive ship. Where they touched the hull, the adaptive armor fought back, but the darkness began to spread like a cancer. "Quantum processors ready for polarity reversal," Lyra announced, her fingers dancing across the control interface. "But sir, the feedback loop will be catastrophic. We'll have maybe 30 seconds before the systems burn out completely." Drake watched as another section of the swarm approached, its mass now easily visible to the naked eye through the bridge viewport. Sometimes 30 seconds is all you need. He opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, brace for impact. Divert all power to forward shields and quantum systems on my mark." The command center fell silent as the void loomed closer. Lyra could see the machinery clearly now. ancient technology twisted into something monstrous, driven by an intelligence that knew only consumption and growth. Now, Drake commanded. Lyra reversed the quantum polarity. The Prometheus's shields flared with impossible brightness as Aetherian quantum technology and human military might combined in one devastating surge. The energy cascade shot through the swarm like lightning through a storm cloud, illuminating its inner workings. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the void began to fracture, not from the outside in, but from within. The ancient machinery, overloaded with more power than it could process or absorb, started to tear itself apart. All ships, open fire, Drake ordered. Everything you've got, into the breach. The Prometheus's main batteries fired as one, joined by the Stellar Horizon and Helios defense platforms. The combined firepower struck the swarm at its weakest point, tearing through the darkness to strike at the heart of the ancient evil that drove it. The void screamed. There was no other way to describe the quantum distortion that rippled through space. The swarm's outer layers dissolved, revealing more of the twisted machinery beneath, now breaking apart under its own corrupted mass. Quantum processors critical. Lyra shouted over the sound of overloading systems. Total failure in 10 seconds. Drake watched as the swarm began to collapse in on itself, its coordinated attack dissolving into chaos. Sometimes, he said quietly, victory requires sacrifice. The quantum processors exploded in a cascade of energy, taking the Prometheus's main power grid with them. As emergency systems engaged, the command center was plunged into darkness. But through the viewport, they could see the results of their gambit. Where the swarm had been, there was now only debris. Fragments of ancient technology floating harmlessly in space, their darkness burned away by the combined might of two civilizations that had chosen to stand together. In the emergency lighting, Lyra turned to Drake. Admiral, what we just witnessed, that technology. It's older than my civilization, older than humanity. Someone built this thing to last, to grow, to consume. And I doubt this was the only one they made. Drake nodded grimly as damage reports began flooding in. Then I suppose this is just the beginning of a much longer story. He looked at the scattered remains of the swarm. But at least we know they can be beaten. Together. The price of victory. The debris field stretched for thousands of kilometers around Helios Station, a graveyard of ancient technology and shattered dreams. The Prometheus hung in space like a wounded titan, its hull scarred by battle, and its most advanced systems burned out from the quantum overload that had turned the tide. In Helios's main research laboratory, Lyra Vex studied the fragments they had managed to recover from the swarm. Under the crystalline dome, holographic displays showed molecular analyses of technology that defied comprehension. Captain Chin and Admiral Drake stood nearby, watching as Aetherian scientists worked alongside human engineers to understand what they had faced. These components, Lyra said, manipulating a three-dimensional image of twisted machinery, they're designed to self-replicate, to consume matter and energy for growth. But look at this. She highlighted a section that pulsed with faint energy. There's a signal embedded in their core programming. They're receiving instructions. From where? Sarah asked, stepping closer to examine the display. That's what concerns me. Lyra brought up a star chart. The signal originates from beyond the galactic rim. Whatever created the swarm, it's still out there, still directing these devices. Drake's expression darkened. You're saying there could be more of these things? Almost certainly. Lyra manipulated the controls, showing complex quantum readings. The technology is designed to operate as a network. This wasn't a random encounter. The swarm was mapping our space, testing our defenses. Now that we've destroyed part of it, whatever controls these devices knows both our capabilities and our weaknesses. In the observation deck above the laboratory, Administrator Kale met with the Aetherian Defense Council and human diplomatic representatives. The crystalline walls showed the ongoing repairs to Helios Station, where human engineering crews worked alongside Aetherian maintenance systems. The evacuation protocols worked perfectly. One council member reported, no civilian casualties. But the station's quantum core was severely damaged during the battle. Estimates suggest 6 months for full repairs. We don't have 6 months, Cal replied, his usual serenity strained. If what our scientists have discovered is accurate, this attack was only the beginning. The human diplomatic attaché, Dr. Elena Santos, spoke up. Earth is prepared to offer full technological and military support. What we achieved together against the swarm proves that our civilizations complement each other perfectly. But we need to formalize this alliance quickly. Back in the laboratory, Sarah studied the quantum readings with growing concern. These signal patterns, they're similar to what we detected before the Alpha Centauri attack. But there's something else hidden in the data. Lyra nodded grimly. We found it an hour ago. It's not just a control signal. It's carrying information. Star charts, defense capabilities, population centers. The swarm was transmitting everything it learned about us back to its source. Then we need to prepare for a larger invasion, Drake stated. But the Prometheus will take weeks to repair, and we lost our most advanced quantum systems in the battle. Perhaps, Lyra suggested, that's exactly what we need to focus on. She brought up new schematics, hybrid designs that merged human and Etherian technology in ways neither civilization had considered before. The swarm adapted quickly to our individual capabilities, but the combination of our technologies proved too much for it to handle. If we can expand on that. An alert interrupted her explanation. New readings were coming in from the debris field. The fragments were moving, trying to reassemble themselves. Impossible, Sarah breathed. We destroyed their core systems. No, Lyra corrected. We overloaded them. But this technology, it's designed to survive, to rebuild. Even now, it's learning from its failure. Drake immediately opened a channel to the Prometheus. All ships, battle stations, begin emergency containment procedures. But before anyone could react, something unexpected happened. The fragments stopped moving. More than that, they began to disintegrate, breaking down at the molecular level. What's happening? Drake demanded. Lyra's fingers flew across the controls, analyzing the phenomenon. The quantum cascade we triggered, it didn't just overload their systems, it rewrote their base programming. They're not trying to rebuild, they're self-destructing. Sarah leaned in, studying the readings. Can we capture this effect? Reproduce it? Maybe, Lyra replied. But we'd need to completely redesign our quantum processors. Create something entirely new, something that combines the best of both our technologies. Then that's exactly what we'll do, Drake declared. Because somewhere out there, whatever created these things is planning its next move. And next time, it won't underestimate us. As if in response to his words, a new signal burst through their communication systems. For a moment, every screen in the laboratory displayed the same message, coordinates, deep in uncharted space, and what appeared to be a countdown. Lyra's translation matrix decoded the ancient language instantly. Her voice was barely a whisper as she read. The test is complete. Primary invasion begins in 30 days. In the silence that followed, Sarah turned to Drake. Orders, sir. The Admiral studied the coordinates, then looked at the hybrid schematics Lyra had designed. We have 30 days to prepare for the fight of our lives. Let's make them count. Above them, through the crystalline dome, the last fragments of the swarm dissolved into stardust. The immediate threat was over, but a greater challenge loomed. Two civilizations, so different in their approaches to existence, now faced a choice: stand together against the darkness beyond the stars, or watch their worlds burn one by one. The price of victory had been high, but the cost of failure would be extinction. As human and Etherian teams began working on their new hybrid technologies, both species knew that their next encounter with the ancient enemy would determine not just their own fate, but perhaps the future of the galaxy itself. Legacy of Two Worlds. The shipyards above Aetheria Prime blazed with activity, crystalline energy fields interwoven with human manufacturing systems. In just 28 days, the combined ingenuity of two civilizations had produced something unprecedented. A hybrid fleet that represented the perfect fusion of Aetherian quantum science and human military innovation. The HS Prometheus, now rebuilt and enhanced with Aetherian technology, led the fleet. Its formerly dark hull now rippled with quantum energy fields, while its weapon systems had been completely redesigned around the principles they'd discovered in their first victory against the swarm. On the bridge, Admiral Drake and Lyra Vex supervised final preparations. The countdown they'd received was due to end in less than 48 hours. Latest deep space scans are complete, Lyra reported, her fingers dancing across interfaces that merged holographic controls with physical systems. The signal source remains active. Whatever's waiting for us out there, it's massive. Far larger than the swarm we faced. Drake nodded grimly. How are the new systems performing? The quantum-enhanced targeting systems are operating at 115% of projected capacity, she replied. The hybrid shields are stable, and the new weapon modifications are ready for deployment. She paused, studying additional readings. But there's something else. The signal. It's changed. Before she could elaborate, Captain Chen's voice came through the comm system. Admiral, we're detecting multiple spatial anomalies at the coordinates. Something's coming through. All ships, battle stations. Drake commanded. Begin quantum field synchronization. Launch scout drones. The fleet moved with practiced precision, taking up defensive positions around the Prometheus. 20 ships in total, a mix of human warships and Aetherian vessels, all modified with the new hybrid technology. They had trained together intensively, learning to operate as a single unit despite their different approaches to space combat. The scout drones' data began streaming in. The spatial anomalies were growing, tearing holes in the fabric of space itself. Through these rifts came something that dwarfed even their worst expectations, not just one swarm, but dozens. Each was larger than the one they'd faced at Helios. And at their center, by all the stars, Lyra whispered, "It's a ship." The vessel that emerged from the largest rift defied conventional description. It was ancient, its hull covered in the same light-absorbing technology as the swarm, but twisted into impossible geometries. It was less a ship than a mobile tear in reality, bleeding darkness into space. Multiple signals detected, the tactical officer reported. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. The message that came through was no longer just coordinates and numbers. It was a voice, ancient, cold, and utterly alien. Your response to our probe was unexpected, it said. No other species has survived first contact with our collectors. Your resistance has earned you the honor of witnessing the harvest directly. Drake opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, maintain formation. Remember your training. We beat them once. We'll beat them again. But Lyra was staring at her readings with growing concern. Admiral, these quantum signatures, they're not just similar to the swarm we fought. They're exact matches, down to the molecular level. What are you saying? The swarm we destroyed, its data patterns, its very structure. It was all based on this ship. Everything we learned about fighting it, everything we developed to counter it. She looked up, her expression grave. They let us win. They wanted to see how we'd do it. The alien voice returned, as if confirming her fears. Your technologies are impressive. Your cooperation, unprecedented. You will make excellent additions to our archive. The swarms began to move, their patterns far more complex than anything they'd encountered before. The ancient ship pulsed with dark energy, and space itself seemed to warp around it. They're not here to fight us, Lyra realized. They're here to collect us, to preserve our civilizations by absorbing them into whatever that thing is. Drake's expression hardened. Well, they're about to learn that humanity doesn't appreciate being added to anyone's collection. He opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, execute Protocol Omega. Lyra, initiate the quantum pulse sequence. The Aetherian scientist's fingers flew across her controls, activating systems that had been hidden within their hybrid modifications. Every ship in the fleet began to pulse with energy, their quantum fields synchronizing in a way that hadn't been possible before. You created weapons to counter our collectors, the alien voice noted. Impressive, but futile. We have absorbed civilizations far more advanced than yours. Maybe, Drake replied. But I bet none of them did this. He gave the signal. Every ship in the fleet activated their quantum pulse simultaneously. But instead of attacking the swarms directly, they focused their energy on the space between them. The fabric of reality itself began to fluctuate, creating a resonance pattern that amplified exponentially. The alien vessel's response was immediate. What are you doing? Lyra allowed herself a small smile. Something unprecedented. She turned to Drake. Quantum resonance at critical levels. The space-time distortions are beginning to feed back into their systems. The swarms began to falter, their perfect coordination disrupting as the quantum resonance affected the very principles they operated on. The ancient ship's impossible geometries started to unravel as space itself rejected its presence. You cannot comprehend what you are destroying, the alien voice warned. We are the preservers of countless civilizations. Without us, their knowledge will be lost forever. Knowledge isn't meant to be preserved in amber, Drake responded. It's meant to be shared, to grow, to evolve, just like we did. The quantum resonance reached its peak. The rifts that had brought the enemy fleet began to collapse, pulling the swarms back into whatever dark dimension they had emerged from. The ancient ship's structure began to break apart, its light-absorbing hull unable to maintain cohesion as space-time reasserted itself. In its final moments, the alien vessel broadcasted one last message. Others will come. The archive must be maintained. Then they'll find something they've never seen before, Drake replied. Two civilizations that chose to face the future together, instead of being preserved in someone else's past. The ancient ship disappeared in a final burst of quantum energy, taking its swarms with it. In the silence that followed, the combined fleet of humanity and the Aetherians held position, their hybrid technology humming with power. Lyra studied her readings one last time. The rifts are sealed. No trace of their quantum signatures remains in normal space. She looked up at Drake. But they were right about one thing. Others will come. Let them come, Drake said, looking out at the fleet that represented the best of both their civilizations. We'll be ready. As the ships turned for home, their quantum fields shimmering against the backdrop of stars, both humans and Aetherians knew that they had done more than win a battle. They had proven that the greatest strength wasn't in preservation, but in growth, in change, in the willingness to reach across the divide between civilizations and forge something entirely new. The ancient collectors had sought to archive the past, but humanity and the Aetherians had chosen to write the future, together.